Presentations of two course teachers, course 8, Laura Kurgan and Thomas Keenan. I also wish to welcome to all course participants that are part of these courses that started this week and the end of last week as well. So course 9, 10, and 11 especially, but also participants in courses 5 and 6, which are still continuing. I'm very pleased to announce the presentation of the Black Marble and the Connectome by Laura Kurgan, part of the public program of Summer School 2018. I'll just read briefly something from your biography, and I will not take too much time. So Laura Kurgan teaches architecture at the Graduate School of Architecture, Preservation and Planning at Columbia University, where she's director of the Smart Spatial Information Design Lab and the director of Visual Studies. She's the author of Close-Up and Distance Mapping Technology and Politics, published in 2013 by Zoners. Her work explores themes ranging from digital mapping technologies to the ethics and politics of mapping and the art, science, and visualization of the data. Her work has appeared at the Cartier Foundation Paris, the Venice Architecture Biennial, the Whitney Austria, Magda Barcelona, Zuccomo in Karlsruhe, and the Museum of Modern Art. She was the winner of the United States Artist Rockefeller Fellowship in 2009. Her recent research includes a multi-year SILDL project on $1 million blocks and urban costs of the American incarceration equipment experiment in the exhibition on global migration climate change called Native Land, Stop, Eject at the Foundation Cartier in Paris. Her work has appeared at the Venice Architecture Biennial, the Whitney Austria, Magda. I think this is repeated again. Okay. The full schedule of the public program can be found on our website. I'm really happy that you're here with us tonight. The floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Faces in the audience. Tom and I have a really lively group on that seminar, and we've already started having really interesting debates. And so tonight, what I'm going to do is really give an overview of the work that we do at the Center for Spatial Research and focus on two new projects. All the work that I do is really collaborative. So I say I, by mistake, I mean we. Have a team of 7 people, and we're always making collaborations with other departments, architects, with other institutions, and I feel very lucky on a daily basis that I'm able to sort of structure my work and research in an institution and to make so many outside connections through the work that we do. So as a mapping research lab, we often collaborate. We're invited to participate in collaborations, and then sometimes we initiate our own research projects. So I'm no longer the spatial information design lab. I've graduated to become a center, which also allows us to teach classes, and I'll talk a little bit about that as well. So if I had to summarize the work that we do with technology and visualization and mapping, it's that new ways of seeing produce new ways of knowing. And as my students in the class already know, we take a very critical approach to data and to cartography. So I see it as critical, GIS, experimental, geography, spatial research are all coincident with one another, and definitely across disciplines. So I'm going to start by a brand new project that we've done in collaboration with Dillers and Renfro, an architecture firm in New York, and another data visualization Bobby Petrasco, who teaches at the GSD. Maybe we should invite him next year to do a workshop. And a number of people in my center. And the theme, the Venice Biennale, I don't know if anyone's been there this year. Yeah, so it's mixed. I don't know my full point of view about the whole of the Venice Biennale. The US Pavilion was curated by Mimi Sieber and Yusha Karpov, a bunch of other people, and they organized it around the theme of scales of citizenship. So they really, in some ways, trying to think about citizenship in light of what's going on in the US right now. And there were many scales of interventions within the US Pavilion. There was the individual, the local, the neighborhood, the region. I can't remember all of the scales, but it's all online. We were assigned that there was a network scale as well. We were assigned the global scale because of another collaboration that I've done a couple of years ago with Diller and Video and Renfro at the Cartier Foundation, which was really about the political, economic, and environmental causes for why people move around the world. So as we didn't want to re-show that, and so as an update, we tried to address this idea of global citizenship. This is the view of the installation in the gallery. It's a 20-minute long video, and I'm going to show you a couple of clips from it. And so the premise, can you hear me? Yeah, okay. The premise, and we suggested this idea from the Center for Spatial Research, is that we work with the black marble. And the project that we had done before had a blue marble sort of rolling around the world. I showed some images of that. But the blue marble, as you know, was the first image that was on a cell phone. And it's an image taken by a weather satellite every day. And it produces, every couple of years, they composite these images together. They strip out the clouds and they make an image of the world, which looks like the blue marble, which was the image taken from space by the astronauts in 1973, and became an image of the vulnerable Earth, of this very vulnerable planet, of which its global citizens, so-called global citizens, are its so-called stewards. So with this update from the photograph to the satellite imagery, by mistake one day, the scientists discovered, as they were trying to take photographs of the clouds at night because of a specific kind of radar effect, that they could see the night lights on Earth. And so they processed these images in the same way as what they call the new blue marble, where they strip the clouds and produce the seamless image of the Earth, and they call it the black marble. And the black marble, instead of being about this vulnerable Earth, is actually more about is really more come to signify the connectedness of the planet and the lights which join us all together in a big industrial infrastructure. And it's come to stand in for the human footprint on the Earth, and some people like to call that the Anthropocene. So that's how we started with this premise. And this is the more common version of the black marble as it's published everywhere as this icon of connectivity. And so the idea for the project, we started with a hunch, really, that this image did not signify so much connectivity as it promised. And if you look at it, there are a lot of gaps and there's a lot of blank spaces that are clearly visible in plain sight. And what we tried to do is we had a hunch that there are places in the world where there are a lot of people and no lights, and a lot of places in the world where there are bright lights and no people. And so that's what we started looking for, and trying to present anomalies in population distribution seen in the nighttime satellite imagery of Earth, seen against the census grid counts produced by governments worldwide, revealing places with bright lights and no people, and places with people and no lights. And we were trying to challenge our assumptions about the geographies of belonging and exclusion. So our job in the center was to, once we had this hunch, was to figure out how to deliver on this hunch, and then to navigate our ways towards compelling stories about the globe. So this over here is what's called the gridded population of the world, and there are scientists at Columbia which assemble all the censuses of the world, and I don't need to go in. If anybody wants to know exactly what that is, you can come and talk to me afterwards. And then we compared that with the night lights of the world, and we took these two images and wrote an algorithm. A computer science student worked with us to do this. And so we subtracted these two data sets from one another. And then what you see here is a map, and the yellow are the places in the world where there are lights and no people, and the blue are the places in the world where there are people and no lights. And so then we had this problem of 16,000 points, and then what were we going to do to tell the stories? And so we developed all these filters to figure out a way of telling some stories. So here are some of them that we did. First, we tried to show how the globe unfolds and projects this image. That's sort of how it starts. Just it unfolds the globe, and then it shifts from there into the black marble. And from there, the absence of light does not always mean the absence of people. And the video of searching for the places in the world where there are lights and no people. Where there are people and no lights. These are the kinds of places that you would predict that there would be no electricity. But from there, it actually, it turned out that was not, those were not the most compelling stories to tell in relation to this idea of global citizenship. And so it was this next part where we were looking for places where there were lights and no people, which became the much more compelling storytelling device. And so from here, there are 8 places in the world that we zoomed in on, and then started to tell stories which could then be generalized into global. DRC in the Congo in Africa. Switching to the daytime view, and these are all the places in the world that the Glencore mining company and other extractive industries, and in those places the pattern was exactly the same, where there were places with small towns with no lights next to places with lights and no people, and that electricity was bypassing various towns. So this was the second scenario, and this was really about this is the second scenario, which is about tourism. And this place which showed up as a very bright anomaly in our data set, and it turned out to be Punta Cana in the Dominican Republic. So Dominican Republic in Haiti is because mostly it was about this uneven electricity in places around the world. But we decided to focus on the United States, which has so-called 100% electrification, except during times of disasters, and the response to disaster is very uneven. And so over here we were focusing on the difference between Puerto Rico and Houston. So that's on view in Venice, if any of you happen to go there. The next project I'm going to show is, as I said in the little statement about the talk, is seems in some ways to be the polar opposite of this project, and this is a permanent installation which is in a new building on the Columbia campus called the Mind, Brain and Behavior Institute, and which is an interdisciplinary institute for the new science of the brain. And just to give you a little introduction to how it works, there are these 7 monitors which move up and down on these tracks. And when they come down to a resting position, there's interactive screens which present the science of the scientists in the building to a very diverse audience. So that's my collaborator on the project, Mark Hansen, who's a statistician and has done all kinds of permanent installations in places like the New York Times building and in San Jose Clock Tower. He does amazing work with data as well. But this project was intended both as a visualization of the science of the brain and a storytelling instrument to make the research that happens in the building accessible to the public. So the collaboration was between the scientists at the Zuckerman Institute with the journalism school, and Mark Hansen is the director of the Brown Institute for Media Innovation, and with us in architecture and data visualization at the center. This is what the building looks like. On the left is the Lenfest Center, and on the right, there's a new building sort of out of view, which is going to become the University Forum, and the building itself holds space for 60 labs for interdisciplinary neuroscience researchers. But the significant thing is that this bottom floor that you can see in the section is really called the urban layer, and it's the part of the building which is supposed to be always accessible to the public. You haven't entered the private parts of the building yet. And over there, there's a classroom, a K-12 classroom, there's a clinic, a brain clinic, there's a rock climbing wall, there's all kinds of things. But the main idea is that it's supposed to be completely open and accessible to the public, and to communicate the science, this very complex science, in a way that's engaging with a diverse public. So from undergraduates to anybody who works off the street, to kids who are coming through there in this K-12 classroom, to any visitors, anyone really who comes in. So it's a privately owned public space, like there are, and there are many of this type in New York City. So we tried to use the lobby as a network of exhibits, but in fact only one of them has been has come to fruition. So what we did in our center is we worked with the scientists who produce very sort of abstract models, and you often, I don't know if you've seen this image, which is called the Connectome, and instead of a functional model of the brain, which the ones down at the bottom, in the bottom left represent, they say, your memory happens here, or emotion happens in another side. The Connectome is a model that says that your brain is constantly sending electronic signals to various parts of your brain, so that you are the way in which your brain sends electronic signals from one part to another constitutes, in fact, who you are and how your brain works. So you hear phrases like "I am my connectome," or "my connectome is," there's all kinds of ideas like that with the new brain science. But the institute itself works on all these different models of the brain, and so our job was to communicate each of them and to tell different kinds of stories about human beings through these various models of the brain. So we were interpreting from the mathematical models, but each time, even though we were doing an artistic rendition, the scientists had to approve whether or not it was telling the correct story about their science. So the brain index also displayed, as I was saying, the models of the functional regions of the brain, and we worked with the scientists to identify 14 different regions. It would be too complicated to describe every single one of those now. But the structural models, as seen here, are fairly static, are some of the fairly static elements that make up the brain, but the video on the left shows how that can be animated, and that was another thing that we tried to figure out ways of doing. Another thing that we invented was, for this particular type of communication, was neuron tracing. And if you can see here, this is a drawing drawn in, I don't know, the 1400s, in 1899, by Raymond Kayal, and he was a neuroscientist who took pictures with a microscope, and then based on his memory, redrew the very complex neuron. But now you have strong enough microscopes to render these new images of the brain, and there are tons of them being produced in the building. So in some ways, we're just trying to show these really stunning images, but not without trying to describe what is significant about them. Then we also experimented with making some 3D prints, and we worked with this one particular scientist, Randy Bruno. These are his images from an electron microscope, and then we would bring them into our architectural software and fill in the gaps and create the complex neuron tracing to make a 3D model. And then we actually printed some of these, and it was one of the things that made Renzo extremely happy. He took one of them home is somewhere in his apartment now. And so these are all these different models of neurons, and as you can see, some of them are really, this over here is the center, where everything happens, and then these things called axons, along which the electrical signals pass through, and then there's a little gap where the electrical signal passes and makes a communication called a synapse. So as we were doing this project at the Istanbul Biennale, there was a project curated by Mark Wigley and Beatrice Palomino, which was called We Are Human, and it was all about the scales, different scales, scales of time and scales of what can be considered human, how we define how we are human by scales of time and space. And so we actually presented two projects there, and one was about these neuron tracings and just about explaining the image of the connectome, which you see over here. So we did them in these little icons, like they're engraved in crystals, like little buildings in tourist attractions. Find them. And those became very popular with the scientists. But in the building itself, our challenge was to present every scientific paper with a very complex research in under 5 minutes. So this over here is one of the scientists, Daphne Shahami. That's Eric Kandel. They were all sort of playing with these, with the stories. And the aim was to make the science very, very accessible. So we worked with a Spanish illustrator and with several graphic designers to create a graphic language that is fun and accessible. But the user interface overlaid elements on top of these scientific models to explain the stories very quickly. So the graphic language goes from simple to complex very quickly, and then alongside that, we also have a lot of some scientific artifacts from the scientists that you could play with and spin around and interact in all these different ways. Okay, so then the interaction happened this way, that the monitors moved up and down, and when the particular story was in the foreground, that particular model of the brain was scrolling around in the background. The installation itself is 9 meters high. Okay, so I think I'm going to flip through this next story. So to bring you back to the spatial kinds of maps that we do, the next project, which was also, as I said, at the Istanbul Biennale, had to do with Aleppo, and it was right at the end of the war, and it was in 2016 that this was 2017, in the fall of 2017. and we were given a space in the Archaeology Museum, which happened to have on display a piece of a column of the citadel of Aleppo, which had just been severely bombed, but it had also been in a war before, and this object had been looted and put on display in the museum in Istanbul. So the idea of the Istanbul Biennial as a whole was that it was organized around themes of 2 seconds, 2 minutes, 2 years, and 200,000 years, which, if you think about it, it denies the scale of 2,000 years, which is the scale at which, the time scale at which many wars or many wars have taken place, and also really in some ways the advent of religion. And it was very, they talk about it, the way that they ignored that particular scale. But because we were asked to do this installation in that particular space, we really wanted to address that scale, the scale of the 2,000 years. So the citadel itself is nearly 1,000 years old, but it's long been witness to destruction and to rebuilding sort of over and over again, which was not at all to deny the severity of what was happening in Aleppo at the time. So that was part of the display, but part of what we've done in the center is to we created an interactive map of Aleppo, and it really spanned from 2013 to 2016, and we were documenting what was happening in the city and the demolition of the city as the war progressed, and to try and understand the pattern of destruction and how that was playing out in terms of the war itself. And so while many NGOs and Human Rights Watch and many international trying to understand who was being killed and why, and documenting those things, we were taking the approach that the destruction of the city itself was a war crime in and of itself. And I just read the book, The Destruction of Memory by Robert Brevin, and the thesis of which is that Raphael Lemkin's conception of vandalism serves as a motivating rationale and theoretical frame for the work on Aleppo, that we were doing on Aleppo. And talked about how Lemkin coined the term genocide during World War II and campaigned tirelessly for the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide adopted by the UN General Assembly. Sorry, I'm losing track of the notes, but basically, Lemkin did not include, Lemkin tried to argue for the destruction of heritage to come to define genocide in as much as the killing of people for their ethnic, religious, or social identities. But he could not at all somehow get vandalism included in the systematic destruction of a culture and a people. So to this day, there still are many people, as you know, from Kosovo and from Bosnia as well, when they tried to bring the destruction of mosques or the destruction of any other kind of culture to the International Criminal Court. It's very hard to have this counted as a crime against humanity. And so, you know, knowing that as part of the other histories of these wars, we tried to pay very careful attention to the destruction of heritage as the war progressed in Aleppo. Part of that was that a lot of the witnessing was being published by activists on the ground using video and posting it onto YouTube. And because we had made this very detailed map of Aleppo, where you could click on a neighborhood and then look at 3 satellite images, which were from very specific dates, so that you could see how and where destruction was taking place. We then coordinated the YouTube video with the names of these neighborhoods, so that you can use our map now to look for specific videos which occurred in a specific neighborhood, and we used 3 particular YouTube video channels. And we've also archived those YouTube videos for future use. We haven't done anything with it, but we've created an archive that we hope will become available in the future. So we continued with this project until December of 2016, and using all of the documentation from UNICEF and from other sources which were mapping demolition, it became very clear that most of the demolition was on the east side of the city, and in fact, we're writing an essay right now which shows the place that the war started up there in that bridge between the east and the west was also where the war ended. It was also the place where the major highway became a choking point, and then all the supplies to the eastern part of the city became cut off and became part of the famous siege of Aleppo. So electricity, water, and highway access were cut off. So it showed, part of it was also trying to show conflict infrastructure and the ways in which cities become very vulnerable very fast in situations of war. So to make another jump, I think the project that the center is the most well known for is actually the first project we ever did, which is about visualizing injustice. It's a project called $1 Million Blocks, which is about the United States incarceration, mass incarceration system. So this is looking at Brooklyn in New York, and the bright red spots show the parts of the city which have the highest rates of incarceration. And when you link, you map the city according to the home address of incarcerated people rather than the crimes that they commit, and you figure out how much money it costs to house people in prison rather than in the very poor neighborhoods from which they emanate. You see a mass migration of people from a neighborhood in Brooklyn, 7 neighborhoods in Brooklyn, to prisons in upstate New York. And when we tried to quantify that, we show that there's a disproportionate amount of incarceration in specific neighborhoods across the city, and in fact as a pattern in cities across the United States. And when we put dollar values to it, it turned out that these 11 blocks of Manhattan cost $11 million to incarcerate people that particular year in Brooklyn, so the project became called $1 Million Blocks. And it's a project that's been in the center for a while. We've done all kinds of work with various neighborhoods in Brownsville, in New Orleans, with the probation system. We're trying all kinds of ways to address this geography of injustice. The other thing that we often do with data is to use it in ways that it was not intended. And so we call this inadvertent memory. In this case, we were looking at Colombia in South America. And as you know, Colombia has had a almost 50-year-long civil war. And there's now that, well, it's a little bit unstable right now in terms of what might happen in the future, but there has been the peace process, and part of this peace process has been to interview people or to invite people to tell the government what happened to them, where they moved, what happened to them, what they lost, and it's a multi-question sort of questionnaire, and it has very detailed information about what happened to people during the war. And one thing, you hear about over and over again in terms of urbanization and global movement is that people are moving from rural areas to urban areas. And so as part of this database, again, right, it starts with a hunch. You have this whole set of data. There's a lot of things that you can do with it. But we decided to try and figure out patterns of movement over this 50-year period of the war, just to see where people moved from and to, and which cities really expanded, which cities have been evacuated, whether people moving from forest areas to urban areas or vice versa. And it was not the reason why this database was created. The database has been created so that people might in the future receive reparations for what had happened to them. And if the peace process holds stable, there are all kinds of programs in place where the government is trying to decide where to help cities or which particular place should receive money first, etc. And so what we did, you can see, I'll just show you actually the animation. This is going on a bit too long. Okay, so as you can see, the animation is showing an origin and a destination. And as the war progresses, you can start seeing in sort of in the mid-90s, it really gets very dense with movement. But what you can do if you go to the interactive version on our website, you can click on a specific place, like Buenaventura, and it will tell you when the heaviest violence took place, how many people moved out, and how many people moved in, because this is what was happening. And some kinds of patterns emerged that everybody thought that most people were moving to Medellin and to Bogota and the big cities, but in fact, many of the small cities were completely evacuated of their original population, but more people moved in to the city post-conflict. So there's all kinds of strange anomalies that have happened, and we're beginning to research the specifics of those kinds of things. Okay, so, and again, this was something that we exhibited at the Oslo Biennale, so there's always a large part of what we do, which is research, and then part of what we do is to produce documents to communicate these ideas. So as I said, a big part of what we do is teaching as well, so we teach mapping as a critical practice, and we really try to teach data literacy across the humanities. There's kinds of critical cartographies. So there's a course called Mapping for Architecture, Urbanism, and Humanities, as well as Data Visualization for Architecture, Urbanism, and Humanities. And so there's a seamless relationship between the research and the teaching, and the projects all evolve out of collaborations between departments at Columbia and outside of Columbia. I think that's it. I don't know if you want to, I don't know how long. We can take a few questions, or we can do Tom's talk and
Let's try to
have a few questions. Okay, yeah.
What you can think of them, and then we can do in the end questions for both Tom and you.
Yeah.
Thank you again. Thank you so much.
Okay.
We have the perspective of the post-human, in which the visuality already excludes humans, in which machines read pictures, and humans are not all involved in creating visual evidence. You know what I mean? Algorithms that read pictures that are invisible for the humans. So, I'm like putting this question: what if those who will soon perform or perform this bordering between human and non-human, which we always think it is something pre-human, some animals, the difference between animals and humans. Now, if this difference will be left to the post-human machinic reproduction of evidences and performing bordering, creating the difference, or in terms, this who belongs to the humans or not belongs in terms of cultural translation as the Butler, the universality, those who are the claim of those excluded to belong to the concept of universality. If the claim is recognized, the concept of universality is changed. Yeah, this is what you said. The new is the changed concept of universality. But what if we have already entered the space in which the whole visual production of evidence, not all, but it is already, but can be generated by the post-human agency?
Well, we have entered that,
Yeah.
right? I mean, there's no question that that's already happening, and that political operations of exclusion and maybe sometimes recognition are occurring algorithmically. Face recognition technology linked to databases is already putting people in prison, or in the case of so-called signature strikes by drones, just killing people. So I have a maybe pathetically humanist answer to that situation, and obviously the jury is out on what the possibilities are, but what we do know is that the scripts which are running those algorithms are still generated in a way that reflects and embodies and naturalizes and automates a whole set of all too human prejudices and discriminations. The training that's teaching the algorithms is programmed by people, by humans. And so if there's a space for intervention, which there may not be, it needs to be forced, that's where you would do it. I don't think we're gonna stop machines from reading images, and maybe we shouldn't even, but to teach them to read images differently is a project for us to undertake. So, but I think it's obviously an uphill battle. The work of Trevor Peglin and Hito have showed what a serious Wendy Chun also, who Laura and I have worked with in the past. There's a lot of discrimination and exclusion, which is now embedded, which is now hardwired into algorithmic recognition technology. So it's tough. But I wouldn't say, I don't think the post-human is definitively accomplished. I think there's a tension or a capacity to challenge. We have a capacity to challenge that automation.
Yeah, I would agree that we have to, that's part of, every project that I do is to confront the limits of all of these, of every progressive, whatever, if you want to call it a progressive form of technology. And there's a phrase in computer science, humans in the loop. I think I would be hard pressed to find any algorithm that has no human present. I think computers involve your hands, no matter, you might move them in a different way. But so I don't know. I don't think we're completely there yet with the post-human total automation, and that we can. I don't know how hard it is, but I think that there are ways that you can, and there are a lot of people engaged in this, trying to teach us where and how the algorithms have gone wrong. So there's Kathy O'Neill, what's the book called? Weapons of Math Destruction, and she's a mathematician and a computer scientist who quit her job and went and worked in finance, and then became so terrified of exactly what you're talking about that she went on this mission, and now that's all she does is teach people where algorithms are making mistakes and how we need, as policy-oriented humans, right, to make interventions. So I think that there are a lot of people working on this, which is not going to stop the huge computational power behind that post-human world that you're talking about. And it's mostly military surveillance operations, which are telling us that they're also there to protect us as well. So that's, I think, part of the problem.
I understand your answer, and I think there's an interesting point in this question of being not at the point of post-human. And probably we will never reach completely this point. But there's, for me, another question that seems to me a little bit problematic in the idea that we could be in front of something that we can interpret as in transparency, that we can look through. Let's say all this, the use also of this kind of images seen from satellites that somehow becomes precise and precise, and I believe that it's possible. But there is something about opacity. So in the second lecture we have tonight, we begin with a young guy that's showing his evidence, yes, but he is not transparent, he is in total opacity. And probably this opacity is much more important because he is in a traumatic condition of not communication, so that he cannot speak about the real object. But he wants to testimony to be not himself, presumably maybe, but that there is a recognition of what has maybe occurred to him, even if he cannot know what occurs to him, because probably it's the traumatic condition of memory. So he has no memory, and there is something about opacity in this. So the question is, the post-human approach, it's not only about perfect or unperfect, or human or not human. It seems to me that the main danger is in the idea that all can be transparent and that we can read all these documents. Or in human approach, there is something that is mainly opacity, our not comprehension of the other. As Levinas says, the other is the radical other, the one I cannot accept. So in the claim of this complex new table, let's say, of the idea of a new table, it seems to me there is also the necessity of not understanding. So I wonder if there is not a danger in the idea that we don't see all and understand all.
Yeah, I think I agree with everything that you said. So there's the fact that we're sitting around a new table doesn't mean that we're transparent to each other. We're sitting around a new table to continue having arguments about who's one of us and who isn't. So there's a structural opacity or resistance to transparency there. I think it's a way of recasting what I was saying. The surprising or interesting or challenging thing about machine reading of images is that it actualizes a certain operational effect of transparency. Right? The machine reads the license plate number. That's not too difficult. Connects that license plate number to a face, to a series of financial records, to a trail left on Facebook, and any number of other things, fingerprint records and so on, and does that transparently. It effectuates a kind of practical transparency by eliminating all kinds of other stuff that it can't read or can't understand, or that have been things that have been ruled non-germane to the question at hand, which is that a terrorist, or is that a criminal, or is that somebody of an ethnic group that we don't like, or whatever. Those opacities are just excluded from the calculation, which is oriented toward finding, which is operationalizes the capacity to identify and find people. So you can have a practical effect of transparency thanks to machine reading.